Hi, everyone. This is going to be one of about three small lectures that I'm going to do on Greek history, Greek society. We're going to cover the basics of Greek society in class, but we're going to cover things like art and temple building and philosophy, science in these short lectures. So this will be kind of an add-on to what we've done in our notes. So here we go. This is the human form, and one of the things that's important about Greek art is to understand how they saw not only the world, but how they saw and sculpted and painted the human body. So let's start not in Greece, but in Egypt, right? Because Egypt and Greece are going to have a lot of influence on each other, especially early on in Greek history, right? And so what we have here is we have two statues of pharaohs. Again, we recognize that. And we see on the left a statue done in kind of a black stone, and on the right kind of a sandstone. But the significance here is that they're very similar. Similar faces, similar headdresses, similar body types. They're two completely different people, and they also were sculpted thousands of years apart. This statue is from the Old Kingdom, and this statue is from the New Kingdom. And so the surprise there is that when you think of art, you think of creativity, progression, change, all those things. But in Egypt, for 1,000 years, nothing changed. And so the question is why? And that's what we ask with Egyptian art. There are many answers to that. The simple answer is simply that the Egyptians didn't think it was important to show the human body in a realistic way or in a way that changed. They were more focused on, as we learned, death and the afterlife. And so a symbolic and good representation of the human body is all that was required. Not specifically anything in the face where you could recognize this king or that king. It had its name right there, so why would you need to show his features? And so that was the Egyptian. Now the Greeks comparatively are going to be very different. They're going to explore the idea of making the human body look very realistic. But let's start at the beginning. Early on in the Greek world, we have a type of art that we call Cyclactic art. And of course, it refers to the Cyclactic Islands, which are off the coast of mainland Greece here. And these are the first human forms that we find in Greek art. Cyclactic art was symbolic, right? No facial features, just kind of a head, nose. We have, you recognize it as a person. It's a female person, and so probably a fertility goddess that you'd use as a young married couple to have children, kind of a talisman. Other statues of the Cyclactic period show people playing instruments and doing other types of things, but very small, very simple, right? So this is prior to the Egyptian influence. Now, as we move forward, we're going to come up with different kingdoms and city-states in Greece that are going to change. The first important one is going to be Knossos. Knossos was on the modern-day island of Crete. It was a trading empire that existed there in the Bronze Age, right? And we have wall paintings on the palaces in Knossos. This one in particular that shows a priest, and the priest is walking down a path, or it looks like outside, and we see his hairstyle, we see his way he looks, and so it's very well done. But we compare it to the Egyptian tomb art over here, right? And so we have a man and a woman, but we want to focus on the man because the man is kind of a mirror reflection of the Minoan painting here. And so we have typical Egyptian tomb art with the feet moving this way, but the torso facing us, right, which is unrealistic. We have the head in profile, but the eye looking straight at us. We have the hands are the same. I guess that's two left hands. And they're holding something, right? They're holding something like this, except it's the same hand, maybe the two right hands. And all the fingers are the same size. And what this does is show us that Egypt was, like the statues, was mostly interested in the symbolic idea of humanity and not the realistic idea of what a human looks like. Now, on the Greek side, the Minoan side, we have similar things. The side profile with the feet moving this way. We have kind of a chest facing us. We have an eye that's looking straight at us, but the face is in profile. But we're moving. Again, we transition to the Greek form of art, right? We're moving toward that by the very, very thin waist that we have here. It looks unnaturally thin, and so maybe the artist screwed up or he didn't want to change it. But what if we have the priest moving forward, right, like the Egyptian, so his face is in profile, his eyes on the side, but as we see, he has his arm back here, right, and he's doing something with his hand here, so maybe as he's turning, his waist is getting thinner with the turn, and so that's kind of what we see. And so the idea of movement and the idea of realism of a side and And a frontal pose is more Greek than Egyptian. And so even during this very early Bronze Age period of Greek culture, we're moving toward more realism. Now, here we have a direct comparison between Egyptian statues in the middle, male and female, and then a male statue of the Greek and a female statue of the Greek as well. Now, the male statue of the Greek is called the koros, right? We're going to see the koros is the what Greek sculptors tried to create as the ultimate human form. The ultimate human form will be an athlete between the ages of 18 and 22. They did not wear a lot of clothing, so we're going to see a lot of nudes. Prepare yourself for that. And he's also very muscular, with the arms and the chest and the shoulders and the abs. Other than that, though, he's very similar to a statue here, the Pharaoh. He's very stiff, right? He has his hands down to his sides, and his leg is out, just like the Pharaoh's. He has kind of the shin, the very sharp shin bone here that the Pharaoh has. And so we have the same type of face, what we're going to call the archaic smile. So this is a period of Greek art known as archaic, right? And so the koros is an example of that. Now we go over to the female form. And this female form, again, is very stiff. She's got a little foot forward here. She's standing beside the Pharaoh and holding him. So this is obviously a wife that the Pharaoh loved very much because he had sculpted very close, like, and embraced. And in the female figure of the Greeks, we see, I guess, not a lot of effort, right? We have the face that has kind of what we call the archaic mask. That's the same. But the body, there's really no effort here. This is kind of a trunk of a tree almost, right? Maybe a snowman type pose. And then we have the chest, which seems to be stuck on the top with some hints of a breast there. And then we have, like, the arm going down. And this arm was attached, but it would go out and probably was holding a tray of offerings to the god. She is a priestess, right? And so this is called the kore, the female form. And it's not, they don't put a lot of effort into it. And here's why. The ultimate, or the ideal human form, was the male, not the female. And so they didn't spend a lot of time on the female and a lot more time on the male. Again, the examples of patriarchal society. Okay, so we transition. Again, art is not something that starts on a Monday and then changes on a Tuesday. It is a slow process, right? And so we begin to move toward what we're going to call the classical period with the shepherd. We see the abs. They are a lot more defined. They have a weird line there, but we do have some abs there, and we do have a belly button. But the stance is the same. The leg is out, and it's kind of walking forward, showing a little bit of movement. It's still very stiff. But if you look at the shoulders and the arms, you have a lot more definition there, as is holding the calf. We have definition here in the forearms, definition in the shoulders, and that's going to be more realistic, right? The face, however, is still the same. That archaic smile. He's got a little chin strap there. We think that might have been a beard or something that was glued on with some ancient adhesive. But the most realistic part of the statue is the calf, right? We have the haunches of the calf, and the head of the calf, and all of it kind of tied together with his hands, and that is very realistic. And so a good example of that transitional from less realistic to more realistic in the human form. Now, we move toward this, and this is the piece that will launch us into the classical period. This is Critias Boy, and it is perfect. It is exactly what a human body should be. We have a natural pose, not a stiff pose. One leg has weight, one leg does not. This is how we stand, right? This is a natural pose. His shoulders are relaxed. His arms are at his side. This is a youth between the ages of 13 and 14. His face is very natural. His calm face, not an archaic, goofy smile like the other statues. This is exactly what a human body should look like. So they have achieved, the Greeks have achieved that idea of realism. So they'll just keep sculpting like this forever, right? Wrong. For some reason, during the classical period, they get to the perfect form, and then they change it. Let me show you. This is the spear bearer, or the Greek is the Doryphorus, and it is done by a very famous sculptor in ancient Greece called Polykleitos. Now, Polykleitos was famous not because he did such great sculptures, which he did, but he was famous for making the human sculpture like a science, right? And so with this statue, what he did was he wrote a book, and that book was how to sculpt the human body. And here's what he did. He divides the body into 4 different quadrants, right? Top and bottom, left and right. So you draw a line down the middle of the statue, and a line that cuts the statue in half, and you have quadrant 1, quadrant 2, quadrant 3, and quadrant 4, okay? He also puts imaginary rods through the head, the shoulders, through the the hips and through the knees. And so he's going to turn the body with those rods. He's going to divide the body into those 4 parts. So here's what he does. He turns the head this way. He turns the shoulders this way. He turns the hips this way. And he turns so it's all kind of twisted. And so he moves the body on an axis with those rods. Secondly, he uses the quadrants. This quadrant is engaged. Look, all the weight of the body is on that leg there. This quadrant is at rest. The foot is moved back, right? Now you go diagonally. This upper half of the body is engaged. It is holding a spear. This part of the body is relaxed. And so we have matching diagonal quadrants, right? Engaged, engaged, relax, relax, with the turning of the body left and right in order to create this position here. And what we've done is we've created somewhat of an S curve in the spine that's going to be very typical of classical Greek sculpture, right? We call it the S curve here when we get to the Renaissance, and we look at the statues of Michelangelo and other sculptures. We're going to call it contrapposto, which is the Italian, right? And so we'll get to there, but let's call it the S curve for now. And so it's great sculpture, but how did it change from the Critias boy? Well, look at it. It's huge. Huge shoulders, huge chest. We have this weird type of ab shelf that comes down. Nobody has that. That's not a thing. But we have that huge ab shelf that accentuates the upper body and how huge it is. We have long, thick legs. And so he is the athlete from the age of 18 to 22, but he's been exaggerated. And so that's what we've done. We've taken the perfect form of the Critias boy and we put him on steroids. And now we have this guy. Right? And this is going to be the theme of classical Greek sculpture, is these larger-than-life muscular figures that are also just kind of posed. Just kind of there. It's like, take my photo. You know, they're all going to be somewhat posed. Let's look at some more. These are some of the best sculptures that really ever created. These are the Archaic bronzes, right? Now, the thing about bronze sculpture, ancient bronze sculptures, we don't have a lot of them. We don't have a lot of them because a lot of them were taken and melted down eventually because they needed the metal. So if it's made of metal, it's probably not around. Most of the bronze sculptures that we see, or a lot of them, were found actually buried or underwater. And that's the story of these two. These were found in the Mediterranean off the coast of Italy by some scuba diver. He's swimming around, or a snorkeler, and he sees this face staring at him from the bottom of the ocean. He swims down and uncovers it. It turns out to be these two statues. Now, they are made of bronze, which makes them amazing because casting something this big in bronze was difficult today. You can imagine it would be much more difficult in the ancient world. We follow the rules of Polyclitus. One leg is engaged, one leg is at rest. We have the diagonal matching quadrants, right? Engage, engage, relax, relax. And we also have that incredibly impossible muscular body with the huge chest and then the ab shelf, and then the legs that are way too long, right? He would be holding a shield here and holding a spear there, right? So they're ready for war. These are probably being taken to a temple to be put as guardians of the temple or something, and then the boat never made it there. It sank to the bottom of the ocean. And so larger-than-life statues. Let's look at another one. This one also found at the bottom of the Mediterranean. This is the bronze of Zeus. And again, huge shoulders, arms way too long, legs are massive, right? Huge chest. He's like steroid, Zeus. And it could be Poseidon. He was either throwing a trident or throwing a lightning bolt, one or the other. We're not sure what, but he's a guy swimming down on the bottom of the ocean. He swims on this guy standing there, and that's how they discovered him. And so, why? Why are we carving such huge, massive sculptures? Why don't we just go back to Critias boy? And the answer to that is we're not necessarily carving humans as much as we're carving gods, right? Remember, in the Greek mythology, the gods were human. They're just immortal and larger than life, and that's what these are. And so we see these in temples because this is where the god lives, and these would be a representation of the god. And in another way, too, it's not necessarily different than what we think of today. When we look in a fashion magazine and we see a model, we're not looking at what the model actually looks like. We're looking at an airbrush model, we're looking at a makeup model, and then we're looking at a model that has been digitized. They can take a computer, as you know, change the color, change the face, change the nose, change anything they want. And so we're not looking at realism when we look at magazines today. And we're not looking at realism when we look at Greek sculpture because they had the same idea. They liked larger-than-life, superhero-type sculptures instead of just your regular guy. Now, that's not to say that the Greeks didn't look like this. Greek men were very narcissistic and very fascinated with what they looked like. And they had the Olympic Games and outdoor sports, and they trained all the time. And they were probably very thin and very fit. But they wanted to look like the gods. Here we have the idea of the discus thrower. Again, speaking of Olympic Games, right? So we have this guy, and he's very muscular. He is the athlete from 18 to 22, and he is in the midst of throwing the discus, right? But it is a classical statue because it is not necessarily believable that he's about to throw this discus. He has in the motion, so what's not believable about it? Well, look at his face. He's bored. It's like he's not really trying his hardest. And so this is almost like, look, I'm a discus thrower. Take my picture, right? And that's kind of what he's doing. And so in the classical period, we have posed figures, athletic figures, but not necessarily believable, right? Okay, now we transition to the next time. So we've had Archaic, which is the Chorus and the Chore. We've had Classical, which is the Spear Bearer and the Rachi Marbles and Zeus. And now we're moving toward the third period, which is going to be known as Hellenistic, right? And this is a statue by a sculptor named Praxiteles. And he is sculpting Hermes and the infant Dionysus. Hermes, the messenger of the gods. Dionysus is the god of revelry and wine and partying, right? Not that you guys know anything about that. Now, so we start here in the torso, following the laws of Polyclitus. One leg is stiff, one leg is relaxed, right? But then we move up to the upper torso, and we've changed. We've created a more extensive S-curve here as he's moving. This arm is engaged, true, but he's holding a baby, not a shield. And he's got his arm also engaged over here, holding something. Now, let's try to guess. This is the goddess Dionysus as a baby, the god of wine and revelry and partying and drink. So what the heck could Hermes be holding to make the baby reach out and try to grab it? And most experts believe it is a bunch of grapes, right? So here are the grapes, Dionysus. And so we see this kind of story, this kind of narrative going on, which you don't see in the classical world. And so that makes it more Hellenistic. And also we see the face. It's still very calm, very bored, very posed, but there is the recognition of the child, right? And so that's a little more emotion we put in there too. Again, transitional, not necessarily purely Hellenistic yet. Here's another interesting sculpture, again, very big and larger than life, massive athlete. It's called the Scraper, and it's done by Lysippus, another transitional figure from classical to Hellenistic. Now, here's what he's doing, because he's got this strange pose and he's got this going on here. Now, what we need to know about this statue, because it was very common in the Greek world, people would see this and go, oh, okay, I know what he's doing. But here's what he's doing. In the Greek world, as advanced as they were, they did not necessarily have soap yet. And so they did work out a lot and get pretty sweaty and stinky. So what they would do is they would wash themselves with water. That didn't always cut it. Then they would cover themselves with perfumes and oils, olive oils, things like that, in order to make themselves smell good. And so what he's doing here is you can't wash that oil off. It's not that easy. So he took something called a strigil, which is kind of a dull metal edge. It's not sharp, it's dull. And you would scrape your arms and your body, scraping the olive oil or whatever oil you put on, scraping it off, right? So you're not all slippery all the time. And so that's what he's doing. He's worked out, he's showered, he's oiled, and now he's scraping the oil off with the strigil, which is gone. It broke off, but we would see that, under his arm and stuff that he's scraping off. So this is why we call it the scraper. We have the Polyclitus spear bearer legs, but they're both a little engaged, aren't they? And we have move up here, and so we are doing a motion. It is more Hellenistic than classical, moving that way. Now, get to Hellenism. Two characters of Hellenic sculpture. And they seem simple, but they're always there. One or the other or both. It's going to have motion, and it's going to have emotion, right? Now, in this case, what we see is the sculpture that looks like an angel. So in the Judeo-Christian tradition, we look and say, oh, look, it's an angel. But remember, we're in the Greek world. The Greek world hasn't been hit with the idea of Judeo-Christianism yet. And so the idea is that it's not an angel, it is a Nike, right? Or a Nike, which, as we've learned, means victory, a Nike of Samothrace. So we believe this is probably a celebration of a military victory. Other Nike celebrated athletic victories. And so it was a kind of a servant of the goddess Athena, and it represented victory, right? And so we have the winged goddess of victory, had arms and a head at one point. We don't know where they are, but here's what makes this Hellenistic. Look at the motion that we see here. Look at the wind blowing against the gown, blowing against the feathers located in the wings. They're actually spreading out and stretching, right? the wind blowing against the torso. We can see the abs as well as the belly button blowing against the chest, blowing against the leg. And it's broken, but it would flow probably back this way as well. It's almost a sheer gown that we see here. And so what is about to happen, as you probably already guessed, is this creature is about to take flight, about to step off the cliff and just go. So we imagine that this was at a temple, like a temple of Athena, and that this sat on the edge of a cliff and it would just take off. And so this idea of motion is what we really see in Hellenistic art that makes it come to life. So even more real than the classical. This is at the Louvre, by the way. It's actually on the top of the main staircase of the Louvre. It's kind of the crown jewel of the Louvre. It's a beautiful sculpture. Now, take a look at this one, Laocoon and his sons, right? This is connected to the story of the Trojan War. Laocoon was a seer, right? Told the future. And he had a dream about the tragedy and destruction of Troy and woke up the next day and found this wooden horse in front of the gate. He said, this is I got bad vibes about this. I had bad dreams. We don't need to let this wooden horse in. The people of Troy ignored him, of course, pulled the wooden horse in, and that led to their destruction with the attack of the Greeks. Now, in order to punish Laocoon for his attempt to warn the Trojans, Athena, who was on the side of the Greeks, sent snakes to eat him and his sons. That's the scene we're seeing here. These snakes are coming and eating Laocoon and his two sons. And so motion and emotion, remember, right? Look at the man's face. Look at the face of his sons. Look at the fear and the pain in the face. Now, motion. Look at the twisting and turning of the muscles. Look at the pushing, trying to get the snake away, but they can't. And so all of these elements are in the Laocoon grouping, right? It's a very famous statue. Now, this was not found in Greece. This was actually found in Italy and dug up and then brought to the Vatican Museum where it is today. Remember, the Greeks were all over the place, and so we have Greek statues around the Mediterranean. This is another one. One of the things we see in the Hellenistic period as well is we move forward with the idea of female sculpture, right? We saw the Archaic sculpture of the Chore, and it was, just there. This, however, we have more of a gender equality when we come to the females. And we have nudes, just like the males, and we also do it more realistically. We have an S-curve in the spine, we have movement, we have not necessarily all that emotion, but it is a beautiful statue. Now, this is a Venus or an Aphrodite of Milos, so this is going to be the goddess of beauty, right? And so that's what it's called. A lot of these are Roman copies, so you might see them as kind of a, hold on just a second. You might see it as kind of a, there I am, I'm back. You might see them as kind of a, where was I? An idea of beauty, like the female, like the perfect female form, right? Now, one of the things that, and we'll get back to that in a second, but one of the things that we talk about with the idea of male nudes and female nudes in Greek sculpture is that we see male nudes everywhere. They're throwing discus and throwing things and running and doing all this stuff because, a lot of Greeks did things nude. The females did not. The females always did things clothed, except, of course, for bathing. And so what we see in the female nude is a lot of times getting out of the bath, getting out of, the wash, and so they cover themselves in the way they would. This, of course, is a towel that's wrapped around her bottom half, and her top half, of course, is uncovered. Now, we also believe that it is possible, more likely, that her hands were reaching out this way and had a mirror that she was actually holding and looking at herself in the mirror, right? A small mirror, a large mirror, we're not sure. Now, glass didn't really exist back then, but you could take a piece of bronze and shine it up real shiny and see a reflection in it. So that's probably what the statue would hold. And this would be at a temple of Aphrodite, and, you could see it. Now, let's go back to the idea of this being the perfect female form, like the perfect male form. If we look at it today, we can say, okay, is this the ideal beauty of the 21st century? Because it was the ideal beauty in the Greek world. And most of you would say, no, this doesn't look like a lot of models that I see on the runway. It doesn't look like a lot of people I see in magazines or on TV or movies. This wouldn't cut it today as a beauty. And what we see with female art is that the idea of beauty changes and shifts a lot over the centuries, whereas the male idea of beauty is going to be the same. Hermes and that statue, going back to the spear bearer, all of those things, you can see those bodies in magazines all over the place today, right? It's just a physical, athlete from 18 to 22. That's all you need. But women, it changes, curvy, not curvy, depending on the generation, depending on the region you're in. And that, of course, is the double standard. Sorry, ladies. All right, so let's do a comparison here. We have a statue on the top called the Dying Greek. And this was located in a temple. That'll be another one of the lectures, right? Temples. was located at the top of a temple in the triangular part known as the pediment. Okay, and the roof goes down at an angle, meets the toes here, and goes up to the shoulder, and so it fits neatly in the roof area there, right? And this is a Greek, and he is dying. Look at it, he's trying to hold himself with his shield. Sculpture is very well done. We have veins in the forearms here. We got a round shield. We got kind of very realistic body, but it is classical because it is posed, right? We have this idea of the Greek. He's got an actual little smile on his face as he's dying, and so it is, look, I'm dying. Now, take a look at this one. This is the dying Gaul. And if you have this on your assignment page. Pull it up and take a look at it later because this is very realistic. First of all, it's not from Greece. It's from Gaul, which is going to be modern-day France. And he is a Gaul. He doesn't look anything like a Greek. He's got stiff hair. He's got like a choker on him. You never see the Greeks. And so he is essentially a Gaul. And he is dying. You see the grimace on his face. He's sliced on the side there. Blood is coming out. And so we have emotion there and no emotion here. And so a great comparison of what is classical art and what is Hellenistic art. Less realism, more realism. Okay, another influence of art. The largest Hellenistic society that we'll study here is going to be Rome. We have, again, the Hermes Dionysus statue. And then we have the Emperor Augustus here. Look at the similarities, the idea of the arm, the idea of the legs, the idea, whether or not the artist here, the sculptor, copied this directly, he's definitely copying Greek statues when he does Augustus, right? And so the Romans are going to be a copier of Greek style throughout the Republic and then the Empire history. Now, let's talk about other influences. Take a look at this. This is the Belvedere torso. It's a Hellenistic sculpture that was found in Italy and brought to the Vatican. We have these massive legs, this rock hard abs, this massive back leading up. We don't know where the head or the arms are. We believe it could be an Atlas, maybe kind of holding up the world, or maybe a Hercules, that type of statue. But it was brought to the Vatican during the Renaissance, and maybe it influenced some Renaissance artists. Take a look at this. Over here we have Michelangelo's painting of the Last Judgment, and in Michelangelo's painting we have this figure here, St. Bartholomew, I think it is. And look. It is the same pose, right? And so maybe Michelangelo saw this sculpture and said, I like that, and used it in actually one of his paintings. Now, let's talk about U.S. history. A lot about U.S. history is influenced by the Greeks because we want to think that we are the inheritors of the law and, the ideals, democracy, that type of thing of the Greeks, and the art, our architecture, and our statues. Now, this is a painting or a drawing of the Temple of Zeus, or the statue of Zeus that was in the Temple of Zeus, one of the seven wonders of the ancient world, made of wood and bronze and gold. Eventually it was moved out of the temple by one of the Roman generals or Caesars, and it burned in a fire, right? But we know this is what it looked like from the descriptions of it. Now, this is a statue of George Washington that we see in one of the Smithsonian museums, and it is done in the Roman style, very similar to Zeus. And so we talk about Greek mythology and American mythology. The idea of the founding fathers are kind of larger than life and founded our nation and whatnot. So as a Roman Caesar or even Zeus himself, Washington is giving freedom and justice to all as Zeus was ruling over the world. And so we have influence in American history as well. We'll talk about that Greek influence as we move on through the year. So that's a very quick sprint through the idea of the human form in the Greek world. And it is important because it's very possible that you might see a statue, archaic, classical, or Greek, on the exam and be asked questions about it. So it's important to have at least a basic knowledge of it. But if you heard this and watched it, still don't understand how it goes or want some clarification on things, please come and see me. I'll be happy to talk with you about it. Look for the other videos about temple building and about philosophy and science, and I'll see you guys tomorrow.